status. So status is someone who controls reinforcers in a given environment. So that's a little bit fancy word. But fundamentally, if you control the good stuff that people want, then you will have status no matter what it is, right? And so the simplest example I have is like if you go to a bar and it's a busy bar and there's a bartender and you have to get the bartender's attention in order to get a drink or booze, that guy in that moment has status. He controls a scarce resource, right? But if that guy walks out of the bar, no longer controlling that scarce resource, he does not have the same status or even close to it, right? Like outside of the bar, he's not getting tips every single 5 seconds when he like moves his hands a little bit and like says something nice, right? People aren't waving money at him as he walks in the street. Of course not, right? But it's because he has status in one condition and he doesn't have another. Now, what's interesting about all 4 of these elements I'm going to break down, they all can work independently, but the idea is that you want all 4 to be stacked together. And this is what gives you the most influence, right? So like any of these 4 on their own would give you influence. Like that bartender, if he just says that, he would have some level of influence. And I'll give you a different example of this. If a kid inherits money, right, they're going to have status, right? Like if you have money, even if you didn't earn it, even if you didn't anything, if you have money, you will have some degree of status because you control something other people want, period. That's how it works, all right? But would that kid who has money have the same status as a kid who has money who also gave you, 10 different crypto coin picks that all popped off, right? Well, if he gave you 10 different picks and you followed them and they all popped off, you would for sure, like think about it, like how much more influence would that person have over them saying, hey, you should put money in this, or hey, you should, give me money for XYZ, or whatever it is. Obviously, I'm talking money because I'm a business person first, but like, think about how much more influence version 2 would have with just 2 of those things versus version 1, right? That's the difference. But if you have all 4, that's when you become super Saiyan. One of my classic examples which leads us to P, right, which is power. So status is number 1, so you control scarce resources. Power is number 2. I would say if I had to only pick one, I would pick power. And I'll explain why. So power comes from something in the behavioral dynamics world called say-do correspondence. What that means is if I say something and then you do it, and then a good thing occurs, a reinforcing event happens afterwards, you are more likely to comply with a following request, right? So said differently, I gave you the example of the guy who says, hey, here's 10 stock picks, you buy them, and then a good thing happens, right? The thing goes up. Great. That person now has power. So that person has status and power, which is why they are more influential than the trust fund kid who just has money, right? And so to the same degree, for many of you who are trying to make content, one, it's like, okay, status, I want to demonstrate that I control a scarce resource that some people might want, right? And so what makes this a little bit more muddied is that sometimes one event can check multiple boxes. And so I'll give you a simple example. So this, 2 weekends ago or whatever, or 3 weekends ago, when we launched the book, we did 100 million plus in sales, right? That in and of itself, me having money from the event gives me status. Me saying, hey, you can launch stuff in this way, I'm going to skip ahead, gives me credibility, right? Because I show that I have an event, I have something that has happened as a result of me doing it that gives me third-party credibility. There's something that you can observe with your eyes, right? The reason that my ads do well when I have my $10 million building behind me is like, oh, well, that's hard to fake, right? And so you have credibility there. And so one event, like selling a company, can give you money, it can give you credibility, and then if I give people directions on how they can do things that are similar, and then good things happen, then all of a sudden you get power. And then the last is likeness. I know I'm skipping around, but hey, we're live, we're having a good time, all right? And so credibility is number 3, and I'm gonna go in more detail on all these, all right? And then likeness. So what's likeness? So likeness is that you see some people say relatability. This can be both psychological in terms of you share similar values with this person. You like their vibe, whatever you want to say, right? You like their behavior set, and that behavior set matches to people who have been positive in your life in the past. Or they literally just look like you, right? So like Layla and I could talk about the exact same stuff, but she's a girl, and so she's going to have more chicks who follow her than me. This is not like a a girl, this is not super inviting for a lot of women. And for the few ladies who do follow me, I appreciate you, I really do. But I have like an 89% male audience. And so maybe it's because of the topic, but I would think, at my onset, I think, oh, it's because I talk about money and I talk about business, that's why I have a more male audience. But Layla, I think, is like 54% female. And she talks about almost exclusively money and business. Obviously, she talks about some mindset stuff too. But I say this to say, okay, if we have these 4 things, and these are the things that create influence. And I would define influence as high likelihood of compliance with requests. Okay? So